Hello, welcome to the first video in the Module 2, focusing on principles of lesson planning. I'm gonna give you a heads up about lesson frameworks. Specifically, in this lecture, I will step-by-step address the following issues. First, what makes a lesson or components of a lesson? Second, learning objectives and content standards will be touched upon briefly. And finally, three basic frameworks are presented. Let's take a look at the metaphors for a lesson. Think about these ones: climbing a mountain, enjoying a multi-course dinner, consulting a doctor, a feature film, a rock concert, surfing on the internet, or a guided tour of an exhibition. So, which metaphor is the closest to your vision of an ideal lesson? Before each lesson, a teacher may be overwhelmed with a bundle of questions like what to teach, how to teach, whether the students like it or not, how much time it will take, and so on. Therefore, as teachers, we need to pay attention to context for learning, students' backgrounds, interests, and needs. Why are you teaching this lesson? What requisite skills do students need in order to access the lesson and participate fully? How does this lesson fit in the curriculum? How does the lesson build on previous lessons or previous learning? By asking yourself those questions, you have just depicted in your mind the goals or aims of the lesson in accordance with the curriculum and series of lessons as a whole picture. Another important part of a lesson framework is learning objectives. We need to bear in mind 3 points here. What do you want students to think, know, understand, and/or be able to do? Describe observable, measurable actions. The learning objectives should align with the content standards identified. Do you have any framework in your mind? In this lecture, I'd like to talk about the most common lesson frameworks in English language teaching, namely test, teach, test, presentation, practice, production, and task-based approach. Let's see what they are like and how they are different. Framework number 1, test, teach, test. It's good for checking what students already know and makes it quite easy to check that language input has been understood. It is advisable to use this framework for language-based lessons, specifically grammar and vocabulary. Leading. You generate interest in the topic. Test 1. Give students a matching, categorizing, ordering, gap fill, etc. task to check what they already know. For example, if your target language is 10 vocabulary items, you could get students to match the words with the correct definition. Feedback to test 1. Check what students get right. Give language input or clarify what they didn't understand. Remember, when introducing new vocabulary, always think MFPA, meaning, form, pronunciation, appropriacy. Test 2. Controlled practice of the target language. Give students a chance to put what you just clarified into practice. For example, if you did a matching task in test 1, maybe you could do a gap fill in test 2, where learners choose the appropriate word in context. Freer practice. Give students a chance to use the language in a freer context. Discussion questions, role play, etc. Framework number 2. Presentation, practice, production. I often hear teachers call this the traditional PPP method, which seems to have negative connotations. I'm not sure it's so bad. It serves a purpose, but it's considered a deductive approach. The language input can always be made more student-centered though. Basically, you present the target language, give students plenty of controlled practice, then the production stage is like a freer practice. Lastly, task-based learning (TBL) approach is a variant of communicative language teaching (CLT), and it focuses on the preparation for, doing of, and reflective analysis of tasks that reflect real-life needs and skills We've been using TBL approaches with these main components. Pre-task. Students prepare for completion of the core task. They are given appropriate language input or choose the language they need themselves. The core task is modeled. Success criteria is highlighted. Core task. Students complete the main task. Post-task. Extension work based on the main task, which normally involves feedback or use of main task content, delayed error correction, etc. Actually, the difficulties in defining key stages of a TBL lesson highlight an important point when using these frameworks. They are all outlines and are useful for general reference, but they are not rigid. They are really useful when you're starting out, and I honestly do still refer to them now and again. Even so, the more confident you become with your own teaching practice, the more you will shape these frameworks, extend them, try stuff completely new, etc. In the meantime, I do hope the summary above has helped to clarify a new things. Final stage of a lesson should be reflective commentary, which involves the analysis of student work by choosing 3 samples of student work and answer the following questions. Did each student meet your learning objectives? If so, how did they meet the objectives? In what areas did students have difficulty? Were the adaptations, accommodations for the lesson appropriate? Why or why not? Was the assessment appropriate for all students? Why or why not? So far, we've just talked about the components of a lesson, questions to ask yourself before a lesson, and 3 basic lesson design frameworks, namely Test, Teach, Test, PPP, and task-based approach. See you in the next video about functions of lesson planning.